All right, so thank you so much for having me here. I'm here today to talk about blind spot sensors for wheelchairs. Thank you so much for setting this up, and I'm really excited that you guys have a demo as well, so hopefully you'll get a chance to experience how the system actually works. So quick intro about myself. I am the CEO and founder of Braze Mobility, and really I started this company because I was a researcher for a pretty long time. I did my PhD and my postdoctoral research in the area of smart wheelchairs. And so I was looking at how we can use sensor technology to enhance independence, quality of life for individuals who use wheelchairs. And my introduction into this, area of research was actually because I had gone to a long-term care facility for the first time, and I saw a bunch of residents there slumped over in manual wheelchairs, and they were unable to propel themselves. They didn't have the strength to propel themselves, and they also were being excluded from power mobility use because of safety concerns, which is fairly common, especially when, there might be certain challenges. In the case of long-term care facilities, a lot of residents there had dementia. And so with some of the cognitive challenges there, the staff was really concerned about things like property damage or just injuries to themselves, the wheelchair users, and to others. And so for this reason, I started work in this area. And after about 12 years of research, was really frustrated that there was still no commercial solution to solve this problem. And so even though I didn't really have any sort of business background, I was really very much an academic. I decided to start a company really for the sole reason that I wanted to be able to provide a solution to people that really needed it. And to really be able to give people opportunities for independent mobility where there were, at the time, really not being offered that opportunity. So I started the company in 2016, and really with the goal of then bringing this technology to the real world, to people that need it. And there's two factors that we really consider strongly at Braze. So the first one is that we really want to incorporate research evidence, and that obviously comes from my years of research background. It was really important to me to incorporate everything, all the lessons learned from the research that we had done. And then secondly, really important to me that we had an affordable and or fundable solution, because all too often, with academics like myself, there'd be really, really cool, sophisticated technologies that we developed in a lab, but would just be too expensive for anyone to be able to afford. And so those are two of the factors that to this day we really strongly consider. Here is just a snapshot of some of my publications in the space, which is a small proportion of the work that's actually been done in the field of smart wheelchairs. So the reason I show this is because although the technology that I'm about to demonstrate is very new to the industry, a lot of people still don't know about it. It's actually been this sort of work has actually been a hot topic in academia for several decades now. So a lot of people around the world have looked at some of these problems and have published about them. And so I really hope that what we're seeing today with this technology is really just the tip of the iceberg, and that we're going to see a lot more technologies in the near future. And I also really hope that this sort of technology will become as standard and prevalent as it is in our cars in the automotive industry. So I really truly believe that every wheelchair at some point in the future should have sensor technology as the default, as a safety precaution. So getting to then what problem are we trying to solve here, and this is one that many of you will be aware of, is that accidents are fairly common. Here it says 20% experience at least one collision. We have several other statistics that are a lot higher than that. A lot of these are self-report, so they're heavily underestimated. But really what we find is the majority of wheelchair users do experience some sort of accident leading to injury. And these sorts of accidents then result in property damage, in damage to the mobility device, as well as injuries, which obviously can then lead to hospitalization. Now, in some of these cases, accidents can even lead to exclusion altogether from powered mobility use. And so I saw this as really a violation of a fundamental human right, and that's why I founded Braze Mobility. So what then is the Braze blind spot sensor system? Well, it's a set of ultrasonic sensors, very similar to the kind of technology that a lot of us have in our cars today. And the idea is that these sensors can be attached to any wheelchair, transforming it into a smart wheelchair. So the way that the system works is that it detects obstacles in the environment and then provides alerts to the user through 3 different types of feedback. So that's lights, sounds, and vibrations. And in doing so, we are empowering the user to navigate safely and independently. The system can be mounted to any wheelchair, and that includes manual wheelchairs, so manual and power wheelchairs. Within power wheelchairs, we can support are compatible with tilt, recline, elevate, standing features, so that's not an issue. And really, our system is recommended for clients who want a greater spatial awareness of obstacles in their surroundings, right? So the purpose of the system is not to take control or take over any decision making in any way. It's really to support the client to remain as independent as possible. Okay, so in terms of benefits then for blind spots for the end user, the sensors can increase independence and confidence by providing customizable feedback. And our system is highly customizable in that it can accommodate a variety of needs, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then for caregivers and institutions, the sensors can reduce property damage and increase safety not only for the wheelchair user, but others in the environment as well. In terms of use case, our sensors are currently used across the board, really, at home, in the community, long-term care, assisted living homes. Although our clients do use our sensors in outdoor environments as well, what we find is that they're predominantly using them in indoor tight spaces, like elevators, doorways, narrow corridors, ramps, and so on. And the really neat thing about our sensors is that not only is it alerting the wheelchair user, but through our auditory alerts, we're also able to alert others around the wheelchair user. And so one really neat application that we saw of this was kind of, especially in the initial stages of the pandemic, we had a lot of clients telling us that they had trouble with figuring out whether they were social distancing because they, while they were on the sidewalk, for example, they're driving, they couldn't really tell if people were too close to them, if they were sneaking up from behind them. And so social distancing was really a challenge. And what we ended up seeing is that our system, by adjusting our distance threshold to 6 feet and having that auditory alert at that 6 feet, it essentially became a social distancing tool. So now if anyone came within that 6-foot range, there would be a beep to not only warn the wheelchair user, but also the other person that was violating those social distancing rules. So this ended up being a really neat application that we hadn't originally thought of, but it was really a great way of encouraging everyone to practice social distancing and to encourage safety. And so in terms of the age range of our clients, we do have a pretty wide range in terms of age as well as ability. So we have children, as young as 6 years old, and certainly we can have them even younger just because of how simple and intuitive our system is. And then we also have adults, 90 plus years of age. And I really believe that the reason we see such a wide population is because of the simplicity and intuitiveness of the system. And a lot of that is really because of my past work, especially working with individuals with cognitive impairment, especially in the mild to moderate range, and ensuring that even with sort of mild cognitive issues or learning challenges, for example, that the system was simple enough and used some of those universal design principles that it would be easy for someone to learn how to use the system. So what do I mean by that? As an example, when you see how the system works, you'll notice a red and yellow light to warn about different distances that the obstacles are in, and red and yellow lights are very familiar to people. With red in traffic lights saying yellow is typically when you slow down and red is when you stop. And so using those principles for our system means that there's not a whole lot people have to learn, and that is certainly very beneficial for those who might have trouble creating or learning new things. And so we're trying to take advantage of things that people might already be familiar with. Okay, so why should you care about this technology? Well, with any of us that drive cars, we've had rear view and side view mirrors for a long time to help us understand what's in our environment. And more recently, sensor technologies like backup cameras and blind spot sensors have been mandated in the automotive industry. So really the question then becomes, why shouldn't wheelchair users have the same right to peace of mind and safety? As someone right now sitting in an office chair, if I had to see something on the floor behind me, that would be very difficult for me to do, even though I don't have any significant upper body mobility challenges or any dexterity issues. But, for someone who might have those challenges, seeing something there can be incredibly challenging, if not impossible. And so this really is, this sort of technology, I hope it's not going to just be seen as a nice to have, but really a must have in order to help really assist people have that sort of spatial awareness, which is really critical when navigating in a wheelchair in tight spaces where you're already facing a lot of accessibility barriers and not really being able to see what's around you. So having that spatial awareness enhanced through this sort of technology is really critical. So then who can benefit from the system? Well, really anyone who uses a wheelchair. It should be uses and not just drives, because of course there's manual wheelchair users as well who can really benefit. And so I like to break this up in three different aspects. So the first aspect is, well, what are some of the client needs and abilities, right? So if you have a client that has low vision or legal blindness or spatial neglect, they might be a really good candidate for this sort of technology. If they have limited upper body or neck mobility, or where they can't do that shoulder check, it can be really beneficial to have the sensors, especially in the rear. And maybe they're a good driver, but they just have some inattention issues, and they just need an alert to help them better attend to the driving task. All of these could be great reasons to have access to smart wheelchair technology. Now, the second aspect that I look at, and this is completely independent of the client's needs and abilities, is what sort of technology and accessories are they using? So what I mean by that is, say they're an all-drive user, right? So they're using maybe Sip and Puff or Henery or eye gaze. Those devices actually require the user to face forwards in order to control their wheelchair. And so when we set up clients with that sort of drive control system, we're actually compromising their peripheral and rear visibility. So having sensors then to give them that sort of spatial awareness might be necessary. If they're driving in a tilted position, let's say they need to drive in a tilted position for pressure relief and so on, then it can be really difficult, again, to really understand what's going on in the periphery as well as in the rear. And then they might have objects on their wheelchair, accessories, things that they need, like ventilators, big backpacks or communication tablets, extended leg rests. All of these things can actually block the client's view of what's happening in their environment. So all of these could be barriers that we need to consider, and sensor technology can really help with that. The other case that I've seen is bariatric wheelchairs. Again, right, like having those wide chairs and needing to go through sometimes really tight spaces, they can all those sorts of clients can all be really good candidates for this technology. But lastly, in addition to clients and technology, the third aspect is the environment. So if the client lives in a home maybe that's not very wheelchair accessible, maybe they're trying to go back to work in a place that's not wheelchair friendly, all of these can also impact the client's ability to navigate safely and independently. So those are the three aspects that I typically encourage everyone to think about and consider when thinking about who can benefit from this sort of technology. So this is a slide that I won't really go into too much detail here, but I really like to cite it as an article that was published back in 2008 by Dr. Rit Simpson. And the reason I share this article is because this is really the only article that has provided a really comprehensive analysis of who might benefit from smart wheelchair technology. And the way that Dr. Simpson did this was by looking at multiple diagnoses. I've just highlighted 4 of them here, but there's a lot more than that in the article, where for every diagnosis, he looked at the number of people back in 2008 that needed a wheelchair, whether manual or power, and then what percentage of that population experienced symptoms that would compromise their ability to operate a wheelchair safely. And so looking at spinal cord injury as an example, he said over 66,000 needed a wheelchair, and up to 100% of them had limited head or neck movement, which means that they could really benefit from smart wheelchair technology, especially our kind of system. And so he goes on to do this for multiple diagnoses, and at the end of the article concludes that an estimated up to 91% of wheelchair users could benefit from smart wheelchair technology. So what this article showed was, at the time, smart wheelchairs were thought to benefit only a very small niche proportion of wheelchair users. And what he goes on to show here is that this sort of technology could in fact benefit majority, if not all, wheelchair users. Okay, so I'm going to pause right there and do a quick demo so that you can see what the system is actually like. Let's see if I can do a background. I don't think I have an ability to
share.
No, to spotlight myself. Does anyone know how to spotlight me? Let's see if I can do it through here. No, I'm not able to do it. Maybe I don't have the right privilege. Can everyone
put you as the speaker, the only thing on the screen? So
okay, well, hopefully everyone can. If you're not seeing me clearly, you could probably just ping me or something on your individual screens, because I don't see a spotlight option here. But so let me just plug this in, and then I'm going to show you a portable version of the system. Okay, so I'm just going to shut that off and explain the components before we get into the details here. So looking at this system, so what I'm holding up here is a portable display board with our major components. And so I'll go through them one by one. So the first big component that I'll talk about is the bigger sensor array that I'm pointing to right now, which has 5 inbuilt ultrasonic sensors. And the way that this sensor works is that it has about 180 degrees of horizontal coverage and about 45 to 50 degrees of vertical coverage. It is typically mounted to the rear of the wheelchair, but can also be mounted to the front of the chair if needed. The other kind of sensor that we have is a smaller single sensor, which is called the echo head. Now, the echo head has about 45 to 50 degrees of horizontal and vertical coverage, so it kind of looks out like a cone. And those echo heads can be typically placed in the front, so we usually have 2 of them, one on the left, one on the right, and they're usually pointed forwards in a bit of a diagonal to help with peripheral vision coverage. So going through things like doorways and elevators, those sensors help the client align to the center of those sorts of tight spaces. You can add up to 3 echo heads with a Sentina, and typically what we see is a Sentina in the rear and 2 echo heads in the front. That's definitely the most popular configuration that we see. And then the third component that we have here is called the controller. The controller, as the name suggests, helps you control the settings of the system. It provides the visual feedback as well as switches for the auditory and vibration feedback. And it also has a button that you can use to power or change the different modes of the system. So I'll explain what those different modes are right now. So I'm going to turn the system on, and what we'll notice right away, So the first thing that we'll notice when we turn it on is a blue light in the center, which tells us that the system is on and is in short range mode. So what that means is in short range mode, when obstacles are detected within 1 foot, we will see a red light, and obstacles within 2 feet will be depicted with a yellow light. So I'll show you how that works very quickly. I'm going to pull back here so the sensors don't really see anything. So now we're not seeing any lights. I'd like to draw your attention to the bottom row of lights. As I move forward, the sensors start detecting my laptop, which is about 2 feet away. So we're seeing a yellow light. And I'm going to move my hand now within 1 foot of the sensors, and I'll do that with the sensor, the rear-facing sensor. And we'll see again on the bottom row there, we'll see a red light as my hand moves from left to right across the sensors. These red lights appear to say that an obstacle has been detected within 1 foot. So the obstacle detected by the Sentina, which is the rear-facing system, is displayed on the bottom row. And then you might also notice that there is a light showing up on the top row, which corresponds to this smaller echo head system. So as I cover the echo head, you'll notice that the red light appears. And so the way that this is set up is obstacles detected by the front-facing sensors, which are the echo heads, show up on the top, And so if I see a light on the top row, those are obstacles in front of me. If I see lights on the bottom row, those are obstacles behind me. So that's fairly intuitive. Essentially, it's looking kind of, front and back. And that is the two different distances in the short range mode. Now, if I toggle the big button one more time, we get, oops, sorry, I unplugged the cable here. So if I toggle back into long range mode, we see two blue lights in the middle that are telling us that we are now in long range mode. Now, in long range mode, everything is the same as short range, except the default distances are just doubled. So instead of 1 foot for that red inner zone, it's going to be 2 feet. And instead of 2 feet for the yellow outer zone, we're going to get 4 feet as the threshold. So the 1 and 2 feet become 2 and 4. These are all just the standard default distances. They can all be customized through our app, which is Bluetooth compatible, so it's very, very easy to connect to it. It's a free app that's available on Android and iPhone, and that can be used to fine-tune the distances for all of the sensors independently, for the long range, for the short range, for the red and the yellow zones. All of that can be programmed. So you can really be fine-tuned to be adapted to the user's environment. So that's how the visual feedback works. And then I'm going to shut this off, go back into short range. And now I'm going to show you the second modality, which is auditory. So in order to do that, I have to turn on the switch, which will activate the auditory alerts. Now, when you see here, as long as I'm in yellow, we don't get any auditory alerts because the auditory only comes on in the red zone. So now as soon as I get into that red zone, the system starts beeping, and I hope I don't have noise cancellation on. Can anyone hear those beeps?
Yes, we're hearing them.
Okay, perfect. So those beeps indicate that something is within that red zone. And the reason we only have it in that red zone is because we don't want to annoy people with just excessive beeping. So that's the auditory feedback. And then the final feedback modality is the vibration. So there's another switch for that. I'm going to toggle that switch. And now the vibration alerts are on. The vibration module looks like this. It's a very thin foam module that can be placed in backrests, seat rests, and seat cushions. Oh, sorry, backrest, armrest, and seat cushions. And we typically have 3 of them. So there's one on the left, one in the center, and one on the right. And so if a client is going through a doorway and they're too close to the right-hand side, the right module will start vibrating. If it's too close to the left side of the chair will start vibrating. So they're getting that tactile feedback as they're getting through tight spaces. So that's it. It's a really simple system, the lights, sounds, and vibrations. It is a USB powered system. And so for power wheelchairs, there's a couple of different ways to power it directly, to use the batteries directly off the chair. It's very, very low power draw. So the client won't really notice any change in their chair batteries. And if it's a manual wheelchair, there's an option to power it with just a small battery pack like I have here. So, and we're able to provide that as well. So that's it for the system. I'm going to pop back here to my slide deck and just go through a couple of quick things because I know people have to leave here in a few minutes. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of different customizations. The app looks like what you see there on the right-hand side. Very simple to use. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of different customizations, but I'll highlight the ones that are most useful, which are the distance thresholds. But we also have other customizations like the way that the feedback is delivered to the client can be different for the front versus the rear. So say you have a client that only wants auditory alerts for the rear and wants vibration alerts for the front. You can do that. You can change the lights and the colors of the lights. So for someone who's colorblind, you can do that. So lots of things. There's probably over 20 customizations. I don't have the time to discuss on a short call like this, but we do provide a lot of training for that as well. Okay, so this is just a case study with a veteran that used our system, and he actually used our system for both the front and the rear. And it really helped him be more independent, both in his home in a familiar environment, as well as unfamiliar environments. And in this case, he also uses a white cane. So for anyone who has vision issues or is legally blind, our system can be used in conjunction with the white cane. And then this is just a quick note for anyone interested in third-party peer-reviewed evidence around our system. I will just quickly mention a study that was done a few years ago. And in this particular study, existing power wheelchair users had obstacles placed behind them in different positions, and then they were asked to, with and without the sensors, identify the location of those obstacles. And so this was done for clients with varying diagnoses and experience, and the results were statistically significant and might shock you, but for obstacles that are low to the ground, what we found that clients who didn't have the sensors and just used whatever they would otherwise use to detect obstacles were only able to detect obstacles with 44% accuracy in the rear. However, with the blind spot sensors, they were able to detect obstacles with 96% accuracy. In terms of the time taken to detect obstacles, without sensors, they were detecting obstacles in 7.3 seconds, versus with the sensors, they were detecting them in under 3 seconds. So these were statistically significant results, and we saw similar results for multiple scenarios. This is just 1 out of 4 scenarios that were tested, but really, really strong results there, and really build the case for why sensor technology is so important. All right, just do a quick time check here. So I'll just show this one video, which demonstrates this client navigating a really tight space, so coming out of his bedroom into the hallway. And you can notice there's a lot of property damage around. There's some baseboards that have been ripped out. And so here he's using visual and vibration feedback to navigate this very, very tight space. So as you can see there, that was a very challenging task to do, but he's able to do that quite smoothly with the sensors. As I mentioned, we have the Sentina for the rear and the echo heads. We also have a couple of other configurations that can be used if the client doesn't need as much coverage. It's a very, very modular system. I won't get into too much detail here. We can certainly provide more information. The way we figure out and collaborate with you to figure out what system would be most appropriate is usually with a quote request. You give us some information about what the client needs are, and then we can recommend the most cost-effective solution for them. So if they don't need full coverage and they only need one area, maybe they have neglect on one side, we do have packages that will offer feedback and coverage just for that area. So these are just some kind of bird's eye views of the different sorts of sensor coverage that we have. We have a few more configurations like this, but this is kind of a good spread. And as I mentioned, the middle configuration that you see there with the rear and the peripheral coverage is the most popular, and that comes up in about $3,000 MSRP. Here's just some pictures of Sentinel on a manual chair with the echo heads, and then here's just some information. This is our Canadian information, but funding, there has been quite a bit of success with funding, typically with state Medicaid programs, but also a lot of charities and not-for-profit organizations. We have seen private insurance. The system itself is a KO 108 miscellaneous code, but because of the pricing under, typically $2,500 to $3,500, we've certainly seen a lot of positive outcomes with funding. Couple of quick points. The system does not detect curbs, so it cannot detect drop-offs, and it also will not take any control of the chair, so it does not slow down or stop the chair. We think that's really, really important to help maintain client independence. So just quick differences. Our sensors leave the user in control, and they're really just meant to supplement existing information, not meant to be a substitute for decision-making or control, whereas with any sort of system that does intervene in any way, that does lead to control being taken away from the client and can potentially cause confusion and or accidents depending on the kind of client and what their awareness or understanding is of the system. So that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Here's just some contact information. You can request quotes through our website there, brazemobility.com/quote. You can also call us at any time and or email us. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.